Live on the mixer in 5, 4, 3.
Welcome to the Save One podcast, where we share testimonials of overcoming inner turmoil and tackle the tough topic of common mental health struggles. Our goal is to create a community of believers who support each other through camaraderie, understanding, and love by revealing the secrets we so frequently try to hide from others. You are never alone. All right, guys, how y'all doing today?
Man, what's up? I'm
Doing
pumped.
well. It's turning out to be a good Sunday afternoon. Pretty out there.
Well, look, I'm really excited. We got Walt Davis with us today. Walt is a friend of ours that we got connected with a few months ago. Got a very interesting story, military, personal life, a lot of things to cover today. I'm super excited about it. We got Thomas here as well. So after me being out last week, we got the whole crew here now. So Walt, I'm gonna let you kind of do your own introduction. Tell us a little bit about your life now, your career, and all that, and then we'll double back and jump into that childhood and go from there.
Got you. All right. Thanks for y'all having me, man. First off, appreciate it. It's definitely kind of a surreal moment for me. You always kind of think that your story is not worthy, and then you tell your story and you see it kind of help other people. And so this has kind of always been an answered prayer for me for a long time because, and you'll hear, I'm a good person, I'm a servant of God, but I got away from that. The world got me. But get that introduction we were talking about, man. 41 years old, been married for 16 years this fall. To my wife Leanne, who is a God sent. She's an angel from above. She was sent from God. There's no doubt about it. She definitely lets me be me. She lets me get all of everything, all the bad qualities that I have. She lets me get them out and forgives me for a lot. Shows me a lot of grace, which in this world today, it's hard to show grace through a lot of things. Right? It's so easy to get a divorce, and it's so easy to move on. But been married to her for 16 years and just an amazing woman. We have a beautiful 14-year-old daughter named Haley. I miss her being in diapers. Definitely do. But she's absolutely beautiful, God-fearing, sweetheart of a girl. And she's a heck of a lot better person at 14 years old than I was at 14 years old. There's no doubt about that. And she impresses me every day. I'm in financial sales, so I work for a company. Anytime anybody goes into a bank or a credit union, man, if there's equipment that's being used, we sell it, from an ATM to the vault to the safe deposit boxes, camera systems, access control, you name it, from a mobile app to a vault. Anything in between, ATMs, interactive teller machines. So I've been in financial sales now for about 10 years, in which that's pretty crazy because I barely graduated high school, and here I am going into banks and credit unions and talking with them. So, that's evident there, right there. The Lord's blessed me, with that. I've been very successful in these short 10 years, and again, within my life, and the story we'll talk about. I mean, you'll hear where He's blessed me, and I didn't see the blessings, and He's put me through valleys to help me see those. And the valleys aren't always a punishment, if you will, because we sometimes view those valleys as punishment, and it's not punishment. It's just His way of getting you to see things, because like men, we're usually pretty hard-headed, huh?
Amen.
Yeah. So that's it, man. Yeah. What?
I said, does that suffice? Amen.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family and I, we attend church over at Flowwood Baptist in Flowwood, Mississippi, and been a part of the Charis Men's Retreat. Charis Men's Retreat. It's how we, met each other a couple months back, and been a part of that. And so that's a really big integral part of my life right now, is being involved in that ministry. And and trying to raise a teenage daughter in today's world. That's pretty much, work, family, and raising a kid, and trying to do the best we can.
Yeah.
So.
And then had some military.
Yeah,
time?
yeah. I had some military experience. I joined the military back in 2003. 50% was 9/11. Be honest with you, and the other 50% was, I needed to prove some stuff to myself. I needed to kind of get away from mom and dad and kind of try to start making it on my own. And again, that was an absolute blessing. Taught me a lot of great things, but in the time of being in, combat and things like that, a lot of things, the good things the military did, a lot of experiences in the military also created issues down the line too. But, but great military experience. I was in the infantry, stationed in Fort Wainwright, Alaska. So in the interior of Alaska, I tell people a lot. I left Atlanta, Georgia on November the 3rd of 2003. It was 82 degrees and sunny. Got to Fairbanks the next day. It was like -12. The sun didn't come up rotational wise like normal for like 6 months. I hated life, man. It was, but man, like the experience, because obviously God put me there because the leadership I had in the military was, second to none, unmatched. It was amazing, especially being in the infantry. Those guys are pretty hard, right? But man, we had hard leaders. Don't get me wrong, but man, they would show compassion and empathy and things like that, and truly try to benefit the soldier, not their career. So very blessed and fortunate to that. And I just did my 3.5 years and got out in 2006, and just trying to been trying to figure it all out since then, but been trying to figure it out on my own, or just within the four corners of my house, and we all know what that leads to.
Absolutely. Well, man, let's start with childhood. I'm interested to see kind of how you progressed into that world, and then I know we've talked a little bit. I've gotten to hear some of the ups and the downs, and that's kind of the high points we'll hit. But
Yeah,
what was childhood like for you, family wise and all?
yeah, man, absolutely amazing. I tell anyone that ever asked me about my childhood. Man, I had two parents that I know loved me without a shadow of a doubt. Would always guide me in the best direction possible. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. My dad's a Southern Baptist minister, and I was born in Mississippi, in Macomb, and then my dad's a Southern Baptist minister, as I mentioned, and my grandfather is an Air Force veteran. He retired at a Grissom Air Force Base in Peru, Indiana, and there was a American Baptist church up there that was hunting a preacher, and next thing we know, I live in Indiana at kindergarten age. But so really, my growing up age from kindergarten to elementary age pretty much was in northern Indiana. But man, so preachers didn't get paid a whole lot back though, back in those days, and so we but man, what I had two parents that worked hard. My dad was a great example of giving to others. My dad's the type of person that will give the shirt off his back if that's the last shirt he has. That's just who he is, almost to a fault. Like, that's who he is. And so going out, him being a minister, I would go with him on his church visits to, church members, or go to hospital visits, or go to funerals with him. So I always knew what it was to be the hands and feet of God, right, and Jesus, and being out in a social setting and being the light, So from that standpoint, I was saved and baptized at an early age of like 6 or 7. I don't remember, honestly, because I was like 6 or 7. And looking back on it, I think maybe I did it more just to make my dad happy, just because, you see your dad up there doing things. But I think I've kind of made that comment to my dad, and he was like, no, that wasn't it. He was like, you love the Lord and you're a servant then. And, so it kind of, puts that conversation to bed, sometimes. But, again, my mother, she is probably the hardest working person I've ever met in my entire life, from working offshore to Walmart distribution, loading semi trucks, to working in the restaurant industry for 20 years and all those hot bars in the summer heat in Mississippi and just sweating to death. And man, she is. If I ever work as half as hard as that woman did, y'all, I'll do something with my life, you know. So the ethic, work ethic, being the hands and feet of Jesus, treating people with respect, kindness, holding the door open for people, like everything was set. You know, like there wasn't an issue ever of there being turbulence in the home. I was fortunate enough to be raised in a family where literally I cannot remember up until maybe being upper teenage years, my parents ever fighting, because they fought when we weren't there or after we had gone to bed. I never heard my parents have a fight ever. And I did not understand how blessed I was until I joined the military, because there's a lot of families out there a lot of guys that don't have that benefit, you know. And I met a lot of those guys in the military through basic training. Like, that dude really don't like his parents. Like, he meant what he said, you know what I mean? And just so it made me just step back. And at 20, I finally really grasped like what I had as a child. So at 20 years old, I was really blessed to be able to see that, right? But again, man, it was a typical 90s childhood. We lived in a small community up in northern Indiana, and thankfully at that time in this little, town in the middle of cornfields. I mean, just flat as can be. And luckily in this little farming town at that time, man, there was about, I'd say 10 to 15 boys around the same age within like 2 or 3 years, like school age of each other. So summertime, man, like from the sun up to sundown, like we were out playing baseball. Roller hockey was real big at the time. You know, rollerblades just came on the scene, man, and we were playing basketball, riding bikes, you know, getting into trouble, you know, skinning your knees up, you know, doing the whole deal. It was perfect, bro. I mean, lived next door to the baseball park, right behind the church. Like, I mean, it was 90s centric, right? Yeah. I mean, it was what a childhood should be in our eyes. You know what I'm saying? Where, you know, your parents could let you go and you could go do your thing and you come back, and if you did something bad, they knew about it before you got home, and you were going to, you know, you're going to tell you're going to get found out real quick, right? They going to, like Clay Edwards says, you going to F around and find out. Yeah. So, man, again, childhood, man, it was amazing. I was into sports. My 7th grade year, we moved to southern Indiana, just outside of Evansville, and played football and baseball there. Got into wrestling a little bit. Wrestling's a pretty heavy sport in the Midwest and in Indiana. Got into that, really enjoyed that. And then, man, I mean, again, like everything's, you know, good, man. Like, I don't know of any issues within our family or anything like that, that one way or the other. I mean, I always knew that money was one thing, right? And that's, you know, again, like I tell people all the time, we didn't have anything, but I had everything I ever wanted. You know what I mean? And looking back, I had more than I ever wanted, you know? So, you know, that is what it is. But, you know, my parents did everything they could possibly do to provide for us, so it's not like they were deadbeats or anything like that, you know? I mean, they worked their tails off. But, man, I think it was my sophomore year of high school, we moved back to Mississippi, and I was glad to be back. I love Mississippi, man. Like, this is my home. I can remember being a child, like, begging my parents to move back here. We'd come down on, like, summer vacation or Christmas vacation every now and again, and, man, being from Franklin County, where my family's from, we'd go down there. Man, it's in the middle of nowhere. Like, middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of the national forest, and it's just country life, right? It's slow, and it's what I wanted, you know. And so, got to move back here, man, and I don't think I'll ever leave Mississippi, man. I love this place. Moved back. My dad kind of got out of ministering for a little while. Again, we moved back to Franklin County. I really didn't know anybody. I mean, I knew some folks just coming back and forth on Christmas vacation, stuff like that. You know, you're going to go to church where my mom and papa go to church, you know, and you got some friends here and there, but didn't really have any friends. Man, that wasn't an issue. Like, seriously, the first year I was there, like they did, you know, the yearbook votings and stuff like that. Went to school and started in August. They did the voting in like November. I was voted class favorite. I'd been there like 3 months. Like, how's that even possible? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, that was amazing. You know, that's like a blessing. Like, you know, God gives you the personality to, you know, to be accepted where you go, where, you know, wherever you go, you know, you can fit in and things of that nature. So I was able to see that early on as a kid, but man, I was still, you know, baseball, football player. I guess you could consider popular. I mean, I got along with everybody, you know what I mean? Was a typical, middle of nowhere high school kid, man. Rode the back roads, drank beer, and got into trouble.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that was, man, if anybody's ever watching this and wants to look up where Bude, Mississippi is, man, there's a water tower and a 4-way stop sign. That's it.
Yep.
And the whole county's got 2 stoplights. So, I mean, you can picture what we had to get into. But, man, it was a great place, man. I was back with my family. You know, my dad's parents, my mom's parents had retired and moved back here. So, I mean, everybody was here. I was back home with my sisters. I have 3 sisters, and man, it was really great, man. Things were going good. My dad and my parents had bought a gas station there in Bude, and it had a little 10-room motel with it, and a gas station and a restaurant, and they had a buffet to eat at Monday through Sunday. Man, it was the only place in Franklin County on Sunday to sit down after church and have a meal, man. It was great, man. Like, we were, you know, it kind of felt like for a while, like our store was kind of like the heartbeat of the community for a little bit, especially, you know, anybody coming to or through, you know, going to school or anything like that. People, I mean, all my friends would stop in and, you know, get, you know, buy their Cokes or drinks or get their biscuit on the way to school or whatever like that. So, man, it was really cool, man. And then, you know, I sucked at school. Like, I was diagnosed in first grade, like 1991 with ADHD before, like, it was even like a thing to diagnose. I always struggled in school, couldn't sit still, couldn't hold my attention. So, you know, there was always that struggle. And really the only other struggle, like, I would say if I had a struggle growing up, was just school. You know, not necessarily, even though, you know, I was, you know, well known and, you know, got along with everybody, and I struggled at work, man. And still, you know, even if, you know, kids still, I mean, like, even if like you suck at school, when kids like say something like, dude, you stupid, like, that stuff hurts, you know what I'm saying? And then, so, like, you kind of go back and forth. Like, I think we all, like, know students that have struggled in school, and, like, they go through those phases. Like, they try to care for a little bit, and then they struggle, so they quit. And, you know, it's just, that was really my biggest struggle, was just school. But thankfully, you know, I've been pretty blessed and fortunate without some schooling, you know. So I've had different types of schools, you know, that the Lord had set in place for me, you know.
I think a lot of us can testify that formal education usually does not equate to success.
That's right.
In a lot of areas that I've seen.
Absolutely. It's 100% mindset. That's what equates to success, you know. And again, I was, you know, my dad always was a positive person, so I like to be a positive person, man. And when, you know, when the devil kind of sneaks in and takes some of that, of what he knows you're good at and what you love and like who you love to be, that's a tough battle too, you know. Man, really everything, you know, got through high school, had my really first real bout with, like, life at about 17, 18 years old. There were some issues that I never knew about because I never saw my parents have issues that they had been having for several years. And long and short of it, they ended up separating for a while, and it just kind of really, for the first time, made me question, you know, faith and, you know, how, you know, if my dad's a man of God, how, you know, how is this marriage falling apart, things of that nature, you know, just really questioning it, because you see, you know, your father's body of work, your mother's body of work for all these years, and then after 25 years, it crumbles, you know. So at the first time, like, my core nuclear family is, like, disrupted, right? Like, it's disrupted pretty big. We graduate, and just everybody's trying to, like, it's almost like everybody was trying to put a Band-Aid over a bullet hole, man, for the longest time with that, you know. I think a lot of my parents were just trying to get me gone out of the house before, like, they finished everything and went their separate ways. And man, it was just a bad time, man, for for everybody in the house. And 9/11 happened, and I was at Copiah Lincoln Community College. Shout out to the Wolf Pack, going to school there. And 9/11 happened. I can just remember it happening, and just not really understanding the totality of it. You know what I mean? I mean, I understood the totality of it, but really the big picture of it, right? And how that would shape my life. From literally from when the first plane hit to where we're sitting today. That day ultimately changed my life. Because probably if that day doesn't happen, I don't join the military. Because in Franklin County, I graduated in 2001, and man, I don't know, man, but there's got to be at least, there's 117 of us that graduated from there, and there's got to be over 20 to 25 service members out of that one graduating class.
Wow.
Like, that's an amazing, statistic, right? So, like, I felt the calling too. Like, a part of my group, was going to do their thing. I wanted to go do my thing too, with them to a degree. But a lot of it was like, a lot of what I was brought up believing and seeing inside my home and things of that nature had, some other things that came to light, which was really making me start to question a lot of things, right, guys? So, like, questioning who my parents really are, things of that nature, if what I've been fed for the last 17, 18 years, from a parental standpoint, it's just a lot of questions out there, man. And so really I said 50% of joining the military was 9/11. The other 50% was I just wanted to find out what kind of man I was. And like, my dad had set the path and, to be a godly man, you know what I mean? And that's the most important type of man to be. Don't get it twisted what I'm about to say, but dude, I needed that military. I just needed it. And and like I described, Franklin County, man, it's the middle of nowhere. There's no industry coming in there. So really at that time, being a crappy student, military, offshore, or logging. I mean, that's really your three choices down. I mean, and that's just what it is. And look, man, I grew up with plenty of friends that got daddies that work offshore and loggers, but that's just not me, right? And so I thought that joining the Army and then joining the infantry would definitely test me to the best of my ability, to find out who I was, right? So that was really, that's kind of how I got to the military.
Man, you bring up something that's interesting to me, and it's something in today's world I feel like is trying to be silenced. But you're right, being a godly man is first. However, any boy that is entering into a man's age, we want to find out what we're made of. And that's where, very old cultures and stuff like that, there were rituals for that.
Absolutely.
And then now everybody's more focused on go make money, but you really don't know what kind of man you are until you push yourself physically, mentally, emotionally.
The whole 9 yards, yeah. And what I did learn there, in those short 3.5 years, and, you look when you join at 20 years old, 3.5 years, you're like, geez, that's a long freaking time, man. But 36 months or 48 months, ever how long I really was in, dude, that's a blink of an eye. Like, when I look at it now at 41, that was 20 years ago. Like, and that 20 years is literally a snap of a finger now, especially when you get youngins, how fast stuff starts to go. Yeah, it goes, I think it goes back to God makes us in his image, right?
Yep.
God's a warrior.
Very much.
God is he's everything, right? And if you're a godly man and you're trying to be in his image, it becomes, I completely had a brain fart, so we can, what were we talking about?
I'll kind of pick you up on a thought I had.
Thank
you. One of my favorite books, I've probably read it 5-6 times, is John Eldridge, Wild at Heart.
Yeah.
And it's all about the difference in men and women and how, especially if you're raising little boys, you ought to read it, how every boy, they want a battle. They want something to fight for. It's why little boys want to wrestle with their dad, all these things, and it frames that whole mentality, and also looking at God that way.
Absolutely.
Wrestling with him, being wild, going out into the wilderness. And, you know, I see that on the fire side, the police side. I have a lot of military friends. I think it's something that it's one of the reasons the world's kind of gone downhill is we don't have as many men wanting to
and I think
get out there.
And I think it's, and that, thanks for bringing us kind of back to where we were, because, I mean, God is a warrior. Jesus was a warrior and when he was walked the earth, you know, in a different light too, you know what I mean? He was bringing the word. But we're made in his image, and God wants us to be warriors, you know what I mean? But he wants us to be warriors for his kingdom, right? And I think, you know, especially being in law enforcement or, you know, active duty or prior military, like at some point, like that warrior mindset is instilled or it's preached to you at some point. And, you know, I think some of us that try to get out, or when we do get out, like we try to get as far away from that mindset as possible, just because it's so intense and it's, you know, for whatever reason, you know, we just try to get away from that for a little bit, but we always come back to that mindset. Yeah. And the problem I think a lot of law enforcement guys and military guys go to, just because of the nature of the industry, is, you know, it's a rough and tough industry, military, law enforcement, you know, combat arms, things of that nature, is when you get back to that mindset, how do you do it the right way? Because, you know, in the military, law enforcement, man, it is like anybody can go in, like, you know, YouTube clips of like drill instructors at Parris Island going ballistic, or at Fort Benning going ballistic, you know, just insane stuff, right? It's great to have that passion and that fire, but when you got to harness that and use it in the right path, right? And I struggled with that early on for really the first 15 years after getting out. Is I couldn't harness I wouldn't say the anger, but just the loudness and the emotion in the right way, because I wasn't in the will of God. Yeah. And then once I got in the will of God, he starts pointing out things a little bit differently to me, and your whole mindset starts changing. And that's when you go back to it's a mindset thing, right? It's how you view things, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And 9 times out of 10, good things are great, right? Don't get me wrong. But when God places a bad situation in front of you, it's easy to go to the negative side quickly, right? Like, so easy, no matter if you're in the will of God or not. Like, it's just human nature to see the other side of it, right? The negative side of things. But man, being able to see things in the way that God wants you to see them, and you're able to use that warrioristic mindset, that disciplined mindset, that God has called us to use and have. And in today's culture, I mean, you see, I mean, even like if you go visit a school here in the metro area, man, the alpha male teachers are non-existent, bro. Like, there's 1 out of 25. And I say that not to beat up the public school system or beat up the private school system, but man, the alpha males are non-existent. It's ridiculous.
And I know we're gathering your testimony, but I love this topic. And so we'll kind of stay here for a minute. The thing that'll get me fired up is, as men, you're supposed to defend. You're supposed to be able to defend the weaker, whether that be your family, your children, innocence. And nothing makes me more sick than all these videos you see of chaos happening at a mall or a gas station or anything. And you got all these men
videoing it.
They'd either rather video it or they're running off.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, I am naturally I am the get aggressive, get angry, get fight.
Yeah.
And that's come from a multitude of things. But there's a quote that I pretty much repeat every day right now, because I'm trying to be more like this, is it's better to be a warrior in a garden than to be a gardener in a war. And so to be able to harness that whole, and then like there's a guy, John Lovell, who was an Army Ranger, runs Warrior Poet, and that's his whole thing, is to be a great godly man, a great father, a great husband, to be a poet, to be loving, to be kind, and also be able to take your life like that if need be.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of, to me, like, that's what a man is supposed to be.
Absolutely.
But we've gotten so far away from that in a lot of ways.
And I tell you, I think it's so imperative, you know, like for former law enforcement guys or military guys, you know, that they stay, you know, whether they're just now getting out right now or they've been out for 20 years. If you're not doing this, they need to go find, you know, Jocko Wilkins and, you know, Tim Kennedy, and find these guys that, I mean, are just a cut above everybody else in the entire world. We'll never obtain the level of Jocko or Tim or, you know, David Goggins or anything like that. But man, I watched a video one time, and I'm paraphrasing half of this video, but, you know, I really took this to heart. And it was Jocko had posted, you know, he's got his own Echelon Front company, you know, where he does the motivational leadership courses and things of that nature. And he's got the supplement line and all that. And it's not a endorsement from him by any stretch of the means. It just, I mean, it spoke to me. Is, you know, he had a project manager or something like that, that every time he would come into his office with a problem, like Jocko's response initially every time was good. Yeah. Didn't matter what the problem was, dude. Like the whole company could be burning to the ground and Jocko's response would be good. So he walked into his office one day. He's like, "Hey, we got this problem out in the warehouse or whatever. I already know your response is going to be good. Just want to let you know." And he's kind of Jocko. I think Jocko said he just kind of chuckled or something. He's like, "Why is that always your answer?" He's like, "Because out of every bad situation, something good's going to come out of it." And like you said, as men, we can't be tested without hard times. And that's really us as humans in general too. You can't, you know, you cannot get to the places where you are without going through the valleys before you get to the mountaintop, you know. And it's, so what I'm saying all that by is that, you know, we're going to continuously fail from a Christian standpoint. We're going to continuously fail from, you know, looking at guys like Goggins or freaking Jocko, those freaks, right? We're going to fail those guys too, right? Trying to live up to those standards. However, being in the will of God, being around godly men, and looking at these clips of things like that, it keeps your mind motivated and sharp. It keeps you, you know, wanting to be a better person, being a better man, things of that nature. Because in the military, as I think in law enforcement, we can all talk about, you know, God's usually not the centerpiece of our pre-op meetings or day-to-day conversations or the way we act or how we live on the weekends, things of that nature. You know, not saying, you know, not celebrating the fact that's who, you know, what we do. That's just who we are, and it's just that's the lifestyle that you're in. And hear me out. Like, I could have been completely different and been on the straight and narrow. That was my choice to fit in and do the worldly thing and be a part of the lifestyle too. But you see a lot of these you know, those hard charger guys that I've just mentioned. Man, they're turning to God.
They are. And what I love, and this is for me, I relate to this better. I struggled for a really long time with godly men because churches I were involved with in my early 20s, guys I was around. I say this so hesitantly because I'm not being disrespectful to them, but they were soft. Okay. It was like, okay, you know, all we're going to do is sit around and talk about God. All we're going to do is sit around and pray. Like, hey, can we go get on the mats? Can we shoot guns? Can we dip? Can we do anything? Yeah. Can we talk about anything other than just
the Bible and
the Bible?
Yeah, can we add some testosterone to it?
And I literally always would think, I'd be like, man, if crap hits the fan, like, these guys are getting wiped out in a hurry.
Yeah.
And I started, what was awesome, like, so you talk about Jocko, I'm a huge Sean Ryan podcast. Yeah. And you got guys on there like Eddie Penny and some of those guys.
That Eddie Penny podcast.
That's one of the most powerful podcasts
I've ever heard in my life.
And Victor Marks and guys like this, that they are the baddest of the bad in the world. And what they've done and seen and battled through, they ended up coming back to God. And now a lot of them have created, you know, like I said, Warrior Poet Society. Dude is one of the most badass Army Rangers. But they've learned, and now they are showing as an example how to be good Christian men, but also be capable of extreme violence. And like Tim Kennedy has sheepdog response, where that is what he does. He brings civilians in to train them, and then he's also creating schools, which is a whole nother thing, to train men, again, how to be men.
And that's right.
And
be
be
that
godly.
alpha dog. Yeah, be that
Yeah.
alpha male in a Christian leadership role.
Yeah.
Well, in our society, it's like masculinity's been attacked.
Yeah.
You know, like everyone, you know, like it's a bad thing to be a man.
Yeah.
You know?
What do you say?
Toxic masculinity.
That's it,
Oh,
man.
Toxic masculinity. That's
and-
the actual term. Yeah.
No, it is, and I know your daughter is, and our daughter are around the same age, and man, like you go look at some of these, and I'm talking about society. I'm not talking about the metro or anybody, anybody's kids specifically, but you just look at how some of these kids are being raised, and that generation's in a bad shape, brother. If we don't do something, like it's in a bad way. And again, talking about that Eddie Penny podcast, talking about, and like, we'll get into the testimony part here in a little bit, is how, men, we try to compare ourselves to other men, and what I'm learning through this ministry is, it's not only us, women are just as bad as, judging each other as men are. But you compare, men compare each other, it's almost like the war stories, who's got the better war story, who's got the most scars, who makes the most money, who's been on the most hunting trips, who's got the truck, stuff like that, right?
Yep.
And, for me personally, like I look at, these military, and look, not Navy SEALs, but even guys that I served with, that like I'll never hold a candle to from what their ability was to do in the military, like, they're role models for me, right? But you hear this, if you ever get a chance to listen to the Sean Ryan and Eddie Penny conversation, it's amazing. Man, obviously Eddie is a bad son of a gun, right?
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. If you listen to that, within the first 12 and a half minutes, I was like, I'm listening to myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, this guy is on a completely different level on so many areas than I am. But, dude, at the end of the day, he's struggling with the same thing. And then what it was talking about cussing. And as a father of a 14-year-old girl who has a loose lip every now and again more than he should, I know that's something that I have to work on. That's not something that my daughter deserves to hear at the house. I can set the example. So to hear a Navy SEAL, like the first 12 minutes of his conversation with Sean Ryan, and he's talking about, I have to do better with my mouth. And I'm like, dude, if it just spoke to me, right? Like, because I've had those conversations, like I've had those prayers, like I need to do better with my mouth. And then here, you got this dude who is like, you'll hear in the conversation, you listen to it, like his favorite thing in the world is still shooting people in the face.
Yeah.
But his main goal right now is to clean up his mouth around his kids.
I think that stems back to what you were talking about earlier, looking through different lenses, right? So like when you've been in the military, you got that master sergeant, that drill sergeant lens that you look at life through a lot of times because that's training, right?
Yeah.
They've broken you down and they've built you back up to look through that lens, because it means your life or death, or your best friend's life or death.
That's
but
it.
when you try to look through the same lens at your home, or in church, it doesn't work. We were talking about that at church a few Sundays ago, looking through the lens of Jesus Christ. That's one of the toughest things for me to do in my everyday life, to keep that
Absolutely.
lens in focus. It's such a hard thing.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot to do with the pride thing too, with alpha men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The toxic masculinity thing that we're talking about, those guys don't have a problem sharing their feelings. You know what I'm saying? The guys that get down with that stuff, they don't have a problem sharing their feelings. It's the guys who've really been through the shit day in and day out, whether it be up here or physically in Mosul, Iraq, or if it's in Richland, Mississippi, or Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis. It doesn't matter, right? People are not going to be able to connect with people until we are willing to seriously take down all the masks and just be transparent and forget about what society thinks about what we got to say and what God's going to have to say to us when we meet him when we die.
Come on.
Is he going to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant"? And here's the thing: I hope my preacher actually watches this, because man, I've known my preacher for almost 20 years now, and man, I've heard him say it 1,000 times from the pulpit. All I want to hear is, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
That's it.
And I've heard him say it 1,000 times, right? But dude, now I'm listening to him say it, because of the ministry that we've been a part of, getting connected, sometimes poorly, sometimes good, with people who are we're trying to stay connected more than I've tried to stay connected now more than I ever have since I've been out of the military, with like-minded people who have gone through things with me, because I can't do it alone, man. I need to be able to talk. I need to know that I can call Thomas when I'm going through some stuff, and I can get in that military mindset and just have at it for a little bit, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I went and visited a friend in Florida in January, and he got jacked up over in Iraq when we were there, and again, it's like one of those guys, like I don't think he and I are on the same level playing field, because his injuries and his situation when he got injured was so much more eventful, if you will, than mine. Like, I feel like his struggles, there's no way that my struggles could be anywhere close to his struggles, right? But, I was able to go down and spend the weekend with him, sit around and hung out with him and just talked about, life. And, bro, we have the same struggles. We're all the same is what I'm trying to drive at. And if we would all just realize that as men, we're all the same and we're struggling with the same freaking crap. All of us are. Yeah. Doesn't mean if you're a millionaire you ain't struggling with it, or if you got to go get food stamps. We all struggling with the same crap.
100%.
I want to say something real quick, and then we're going to jump back into your testimony.
Yeah, for sure.
But what you just brought up is something I've been looking at, thinking a lot about lately. Is just like right there, you comparing your injury, which we're going to get into, to his injury. We're all so bad about doing that.
Absolutely.
Trauma is trauma. It's something I have learned and have educated myself on through therapy and doing research. For instance, I, over the years, have found myself, I've heard other guys say, "Yeah, man, that call I was on, it wasn't quite as bad as that one you had a couple years ago." Or, "I can't imagine what you're feeling because I did this and I don't." We, as humans, have to compare everything. But honestly, if you've been through anything, for instance, if you've been through, hypothetically, a shooting where you've killed somebody, you've taken a life. Yeah, you might not, someone else might not know that feeling of pulling that trigger right before. But if they've lost somebody dear to them, or they witnessed a mass shooting situation or something, there's still a relation that can be made there. And I think that's one of the walls that I'm wanting to bring down, is this whole, my story, my situation isn't bad enough. Mm-hmm. And because I can tell you, since I gave my testimony a couple weeks ago, I've had a good bit of people reach out, and they've been like, "Man, I had no idea you went through any of that. Had no idea you struggled with all the stuff you did. Had no idea you tried to commit suicide." All these different things, they're like, "I'd have never known." Well, the reason they would have never known is because I would never talk about it before, because I didn't feel worthy of telling anybody my story, because I didn't get abused as a kid.
Yeah.
I didn't get sexually abused by anybody. I didn't OD. I have not, as of today, had to take a life yet.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to be overlooked. That right there, like your story, Walt's story of coming up in a great childhood,
Mm-hmm.
a great surrounding, like that needs to be, a light needs to be shined on that, because just because you've had an awesome upbringing, we want that for all of our kids.
That's right.
You know what I mean? We want that testimony for all of them. But no matter where we come from, the roads we've all went down, and we're all sitting on these couches, all, facing and talking to each other. So, that needs to be, spoken about, is that, that's something to speak about, I should say, that
I have people ask me, like, what, in starting this, one, this is God's podcast. He called me to do it. But one of the main things that I have wanted to do is just bring those walls down of people feeling like they couldn't talk about something. Even, I mean, the biggest, most traumatic thing I've dealt with outside of law enforcement and police stuff is my divorce that I went through, and the things that occurred in that divorce. For me, at first, I didn't want to talk to nobody about it because I was like, man, people get divorced every day. Well, some people get a different situation than what I got, or some people are affected differently and all that. We're so quick to look at one another and say, I don't have it as bad, so I need to sit here and be quiet.
That's right.
I don't need to say anything. That guy lost 2 legs in Iraq. I only lost 1. You know,
oh, absolutely,
kind of thing. And it's still there. It still needs to be talked about. So I just wanted to hit on that a little bit is, you know, for our audience to hear, don't get caught up on comparing yourself to other people's trauma to the point where it does not allow you to deal with your own trauma.
Or non-trauma.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, and I don't want to speak out of line, you know, just knowing folks that didn't have the same upbringing that I did, like they look at kids that did have a good upbringing as, you know, like they're special. They, you know, they had good mamas and daddies. They're different than I am, and all. No, they're not.
Yeah.
They just had a crappy set of parents.
You know
what
I
mean? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
but that ultimately shapes and molds which way kids are gonna go too, right? So,
you know, in a way, some of the stuff I've seen that have no statistical anything to back this up, but I almost feel like a lot of times the ones who had the picture perfect, quote unquote, child upbringing, that they didn't struggle as teenagers or early 20s, they end up struggling with stuff later in life that because this other person struggled so early in life, they learned lessons. It's all like the yin yang, whatever. It balances out. Like, just because you grew up, great childhood, doesn't mean you didn't have struggles. Just because you grew up with a horrible childhood doesn't mean you're going to have a horrible adult life. It's really all about when you recognize that life sucks. It's difficult. You need good people around you. You need God most of all. And you need to talk about whatever it is. At whatever age you learn that is when things start getting better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that, you know, that comment right there, you know, life sucks. I think life does suck, but I think, like, the more I hear that term, life sucks, like, it's just another word for the devil sucks, because life is the devil, right? Like, that's not what God intended for us whenever he created the heavens and the earth. You know, it was to be a perfect world and a perfect earth. He didn't intend for us for life to suck. So, I mean, that's really another way to look at it, you know, is that's actually the devil that sucks. You know, it's not life, it's the devil.
I have my few things that I say all the time, and that me saying life sucks is one of them.
Oh, absolutely.
And I actually had somebody one time, they're like, man, that's kind of pessimistic. Like, it's pretty negative. I'm like, you believe in God, right? And they're like, well, yeah, you know. I said, okay. The fall of man. There's nothing in this world that is good. There's nothing about me, nothing about you, you know. So life does suck.
Yeah.
Like, if you think that this life is better than the next, you're in trouble.
Yes,
the whole point of being here and battling and running after God is because every single thing about this world sucks. It's not what it was meant to be. And after I told them that, they were like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Because I'll tell people all the time, like, I'll tell you, I'm not the guy to call and me be rainbows and sunshine to you.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows if you call, I mean, I guess it's my way of dealing with stuff. I'm working on it. I got a therapist. He tries to help me with it, but I'm not necessarily pessimistic, but I'm the guy that will tell you, be like, yeah, dude, that effing sucks. Like, fight that shit, because that's how I have to talk to myself. And so when I start thinking about life and all that, I'll tell people all the time, I'm like, yeah, dude, life sucks.
Oh, it's hard.
It does,
No
because
doubt.
Satan is everywhere in this world. And until we're out of this world,
That's fact.
everything's going to be tough.
I can tell you where my life started to suck a lot less.
Exactly.
That's whenever I stopped doing things my way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing it my way sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I made a catastrophe of that. So when we stop doing things our way,
Yeah.
life tends to suck a lot less.
I was well on my way to making a big catastrophe myself, and luckily I had a friend, more of an acquaintance at the time, who invited me on my retreat, and luckily, at that time, I didn't know it then, but God put him in my life because he knew I needed this.
Yeah.
And he might have been the only one that I probably would have actually gone on. And again, we were just acquaintances, right? I mean, it wasn't like I've known him my entire life, but I just had a respect for the man for whatever reason. And the way he sold it to me, it's going to be the closest group of men you've ever had since the military. I was like, dude, that's a pretty stout statement.
Yep.
But, dude, it is. It's the closest group of men I've had since I've been in the military. I feel more whole since truly giving myself to the Lord and giving myself to the retreat to help. Because now, where we're talking, we've talked about, tearing down those walls. Like, I've seen enough men tear down walls and share their stories. And, I mean, like, crazy stories that men don't share with other men. You know what I mean? Man, if people are willing to do that to help me, there's got to be something I can do to help them. And then you see people change, man, and then you get a group of guys that you're able to be a part of that you generally just get to go through life with, right? That there's out of, 10 guys you may meet that weekend, you're going to pick up 2 or 3 that you're going to be able to call.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That you didn't have before. That's going to be able to go life with you. You know what I mean?
100%.
So,
Man,
Well, let's jump back.
Okay.
I want to hear about your military career.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff going to come out of that, I know,
Yeah.
and then there's going to be a couple of things we probably dive in. So let's go through that real quick.
Excuse me. So, joined the infantry in 2003. Went to basic training in 2003, Fort Benning, Georgia. After basic training, got stationed at Fort Wainwright, Alaska, which is in Fairbanks, the interior of Alaska. So went from Mississippi down south, heat, humidity, to dry air, cool weather, freezing cold weather. Paradise, bro. Mosquitoes the size of hawks, and they travel in clouds. But no, got to Alaska in November of 2003 to my duty station there. I was part of the 172nd STRIKKER Brigade combat team. Not a very well-known unit. Kind of probably stuck up there during the whole Cold War, World War II and, Russia and all that stuff. The Aleutian Islands, they had some battles up there. But it's just a random military post because it's in the interior of Alaska, man. It's crazy. But, man, got up there.
So the STRIKKERs, sorry.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
Amphibious?
So the STRIKKERs are the 8-wheeled tanks. Right. So they have 8-wheel, 4 on each side. And basically it's an infantry carrying vehicle.
Oh,
so it's basically the military, I think acronym is ICV, infantry carrying vehicle or something like that. It's been a couple of years. But man, it got up there and that's when in your military career, basic training's nothing. Like that's cheese, that's a piece of cheesecake. When you get to your units, when you really have to prove yourself, because then you're in the unit with guys who have Ranger tabs, who deployed 2 or 3 different times. Tough men. So basic training isn't the toughest part of the military experience. Is when you get to your unit and you got to prove yourself as a man, as a leader, things of that nature. And I'm gonna be honest, I struggled at that honestly first. I mean, like I talked about, we left November of 2003 to go to Fairbanks, and it's 82 degrees in Atlanta, and you get to Fairbanks, it's -12. You don't see a full rotation of sunlight for like 6.5 months, bro. Like I hated life, man. And when I was talking about how I needed that military mindset, to help me prove who I was, I should have known then. I should, you don't ask for what you don't want, because God will give it to you if you ask for it sometimes, right? When I say these guys were old school, they were old school. Man, there was kids getting scuffed up left and right, you know. I was still joining still enough time where we still had to shine our boots and all that stuff. So like I said, it was still that old school mentality floating around.
These young kids don't know nothing about
No,
shining boots.
no, nothing about shining them boots. Like I'll shine some, like if I got to go for a business meeting or something like that, I'll shine my dress shoes up, and I'll always come out and be, look at these shoes. See your face in them. Didn't get much out of me, but I know how to shine a shoe.
That's right.
That's right, dude. And mop a
That
floor.
is
Sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the mopper at the house too.
Last day I ever shined a pair of shoes was at the police academy, and I won't shine another pair.
Yeah. I actually had
Actually-
someone compliment
hated
my
that.
sweeping. They're like, "You sweep really good." I was like, "Well, I was in the military.
Yeah, I was like, anytime there's mopping to be done, I'm like, hey,
Lots of extra duty."
I got really good experience doing this. If you need me to mop, I'm your man. But like hardcore, like I say, hardcore leaders, just tough men, right? Didn't take no shit off of nobody.
Mm-hmm.
If you were weak, you were weak, and they were going to let you know. And didn't really like my first initial squad leader. I'm sure he'll listen to this. But man, I needed him in my life at that time, just because at that point in time, when I got to Alaska, my parents finally divorced, and my dad had was dealing with some mental health stuff. And I just needed a strong male figure in my life at that time. Not that, you know, my dad wasn't my dad, right?
Yeah.
But I physically couldn't touch my dad, couldn't talk to my dad. And, like, that was the only male figure from a leadership role I had at that time. And that's just what I needed at that point in my life, because I was kind of broken just from that nuclear family being destroyed. Like, I'm up here in Alaska closer to Russia than I am my own home. My parents are divorcing. And I mean, like, what am I supposed to do here? You know? But the tough love that they showed me, definitely helped mold me into who I am today as well. So the leadership that my dad provided me from a childhood standpoint, with work ethic my mom showed me, and my father. I'm not saying my dad didn't work, because, you know, being a preacher, you're going to work. whether you preaching or not, man, you got folks, you know, bothering you, you know, I would say bothering you, but, you know, calling and constantly needing things, stuff like that. And so, again, very fortunate, really. I mean, even up to this point, you know, the Lord has put amazing people in my life. You know, as kids, you know, at 20 years old, I'm still a kid, right? You don't understand what you have really in front of you until it's gone sometimes, you know. So looking back over the last 20-something years, I mean, the initial leadership that I had when I first got to Alaska was exactly what I needed. I hated every freaking second of it. Probably wanted to kill myself at one point. Did want to kill myself at one point just to get out of there, because I was so miserable, man. It was so against the norm. Like, everything from weather to sun to how people treated you. And again, I mean, you go through basic training and you expect basic training to be that way, right? But, you know, I guess in my, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess in my, undeveloped mind at that point, I thought that once we got to the Army, like, everybody was going to be like everybody I've always been around, nice. And no, dude, you know, I mean, I knew people were going to be rough and gruff, but, you know, like, I didn't think it was going to be like, dude, they will want to inflict as much pain in your body as possible if you mess up.
Yeah.
Like, dude, they love you and all, but dude, you mess up, they gonna make you hate life, bro. You know,
That's the love language.
it is, and it's, you know, when you first get in, that's hard to comprehend, because up until your point, life's really a game. At 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, I mean, you're still playing, right? But when you step off that bus, you know, onto Fort Benning or at Parris Island or Fort Leonard Wood, wherever you go, bro, at that time, you were there to save lives and come home alive. It wasn't, they didn't care, bro. Like, they did not care. And that, once you get to the combat situation, you go back to that basic training memory in your mind of why they were like, get somebody killed doing that. And you're like, dude, calm down, psycho. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that serious. No, bro, it's serious. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But you know, eventually everything panned out, man. I started making friends and all that stuff. As far as my salvation at that point, talking about being saved at an early age, I was in church, my entire life, but still just never really, gave my life. I kind of was just checking boxes, as we normally do, especially as a high school kid in the South, us country boys and all. So we're going to go ride and drink beer on Sunday night and show up half hungover on Sunday morning because that's what mama expects of us, but not really living Sunday afternoon to Sunday morning again, doing the right thing. I'm never not trusted in the Lord, like never not. Like I've always reached out to him. Maybe, I think, just like a lot of people, we get away from reaching out to him as much as we want to, and then it becomes a habit of not praying or reaching out to him. And the next thing you know, you're in a cyclone of events and you don't know how you got there. You're right. And that's kind of where I was, I would tell people I believed in God, things of that nature and, and trying to live that infantry lifestyle. And I remember just being like homesick, like one Thursday or Friday afternoon and to tell you, where we were technology wise back in the day of, 03, early 04, I got the yellow pages out up there in Fairbanks, Alaska and started trying to find a church. I was trying to go back to that foundation that I had, right? Because I knew that I would have some comfort if I found a church just to go get inside and hear somebody. I would have comfort, like almost like that was me getting back to my normalization, because that was my whole childhood, right? Like being in the church, dad preaching, being around the church, my mother being like one of the most godly woman I've ever met in my entire life. Man, and dude, so I find the only Baptist church in Fairbanks, Alaska. Like there was one. And, man, I called a cab, and dude came pick me up and took me to church, and it happened to be dinner on the ground that day. And, like, when I say that church, like, loved me that day, like, they put their arms around me and loved on me and took me, sent me home with 2 or 3 plates of food and, obviously with the invitation to come back next Sunday. But I made a new friend that week. We went to the bar, the following week. The worldly fulfillment took the place of the godly fulfillment, right? I didn't go to church for the next 3.5 years unless I was in Mississippi. Just didn't do it because it wasn't part of the lifestyle that I was living Monday through Friday away from, my family.
Yeah.
And again, like you just go back to that lifestyle. It's hard to live a Christian lifestyle in that settings. It just really is. And I'm sure in your line of work, being in law enforcement, same thing.
Yeah.
Your experience in the military, pretty accurate there.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to, and I know your story's a little bit different, like, as far as, but, going through your military experience, like, God and, Christianity's not really, unless your leaders are strong Christian men. God.
That's part of my testimony is that I actually had a satanic Bible and satanic rituals in my trailer when I was in Iraq. And they say there's no, there's no atheists in the foxhole, but there was plenty,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think a lot of it stems from kind of a desire for that. I don't know, everyone's seen Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan's wanting that death, just like the soldiers from the Spartans or whatnot. They want that sweet death. Like you almost crave it a little bit. I'm sure you feel that in law enforcement. That it's like fulfilling your purpose, right? Because that's what you sign up for. And it in the back of your head.
Yeah.
It's always floating around.
Yeah,
especially that day's going to come.
Especially signing up and then after 9/11 earlier, right after that, I mean, what you're signing up for, especially you joining the infantry. Yeah. Like, I mean, and it's, we'll continue this military conversation. You'll go into, How does somebody get hurt like that? And I only get hurt like, and it's just, you battle with all that stuff too. But again, strong leadership from a military standpoint, like amazing leadership. I was fortunate enough that my mom's youngest brother, who was in the Air Force at the time, had already been stationed at Eielson Air Force Base, which is about 5 or 10 miles down the road from where I was stationed. And when he heard that I was getting stationed up there, man, he put a packet in, and his whole family moved up there. So I had an aunt and uncle 10 minutes down the road.
Nice.
Never had a relationship with him at all prior to this, just because he was in the Air Force and the age difference, right? But they were such a blessing to me because, man, it was my escape to normalcy. Yeah. Even though we didn't really have a relationship, that was still my mom's maiden name, and that was her brother, and that was my uncle, and that was my aunt, and I knew I could go there and be treated like family and get loved on and get good counseling on things because AE, my uncle's been in the military now for 17, 18 years. Obviously our jobs are completely different, but the military advice is still military advice, right? Just like law enforcement advice is still law enforcement advice. It doesn't matter if you get it from a new one or, a new cadet or a 20-year captain, right? Advice is advice. So you want to try to get as much as you can. And man, they took some of my friends in like they were their own family. I mean, we'd have like 4 grunts down there in their basement over the weekend, just destroying things. Like beer bottles would be everywhere. We put their kid in the dryer one time. I mean, I think one of my friends pissed on their dog. Like, I mean, it was just the craziest thing in the world, man. But she would fix us the big old meal, and then we'd have three however many of us was there. If there was 4 of us or 5 of us or 3 of us, there would be that many number of grocery bags full of groceries and a little bit of money, and she'd send us on our way on Sunday afternoon, man.
Nice.
So, that's, and again, man, Alaska's an amazing place, man. Wouldn't wish to go back anywhere else if I was in the military. It was just a great, great experience, man. And then, obviously, we talk about 9/11 already a good bit, but, obviously we get our orders. We get our orders in, I don't know, I think it was around late 2004, early 2005. We're going to deploy, and then, we learned later on we're going to go to Mosul, Iraq for a 12-month deployment. So we start doing that process, man, things start getting, a little bit more serious. Training gets a little bit more in depth, a lot more training, continuous training, and more training. But, I think a lot of it is with everything, and you may think this about when you are deploying too is, dude, there's gonna be a lot of people get killed over here. Like, we're so jacked up, like we are the most ate up unit in the entire world, and then we get over there and we deploy, and man, we shone like stars, man. It was awesome, and it just goes back to the leadership that we had, but. We deployed to Mosul in September timeframe of 2005. Spent a month in Kuwait, doing a little extra train up, getting ready to go over there. So September, early October-ish is when we really kind of took over that sector in Mosul from the 25th Infantry Division out of Fort Lewis, Washington. We replaced them, and by the time war is completely different now than it was in 2001, 2002, 2003, right? I mean, things are, as we see in Ukraine and Israel, like things are being done a little bit differently now. And the early part of the war, with the Marines going into Fallujah and Third ID and those guys, like there was a lot of door kicking in and stuff like that. And while our units, and we were still kicking in doors, but it wasn't as as prominent as they were in the early part of the war. One of the biggest things that we faced over there were IEDs. And I think, and if anybody's watching from my unit and has the accurate numbers, I think, man, like we were getting like 100 a month, man. I mean, it was crazy, and they were getting creative with it. They were running water hoses across the street, to where when the vehicle ran over it, shot that pressure, and it was a pressure charge, and it would detonate. I mean, they were putting them in cowls, and I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, they were getting so inventive with it. And literally we get to Mosul, man, and if there's some listeners out there that are not familiar with where Mosul is from a biblical standpoint, that's in the Nineveh province. So Nineveh province, think about Jonah and the whale. That's in Nineveh province, the walls of Nineveh. And so was really cool, being a believer, still, not being a full man of Christ yet, but still being a believer, seeing some of those biblical stories come to life. Like we got to go by the tomb of Jonah every day almost, and to get to see that come to life, and going through the walls of Nineveh and hearing the stories of, Nineveh and things of that nature, and getting to see that really stand in front of you. Unfortunately, I mean, our first ride outside the wire, we were going through the walls of Nineveh, and we got hit by our first IED, man, and I'll never forget, there was a guy standing right where it went off, and I don't know if he was a part of it or if he wasn't, but, man, that thing went off, and he just evaporated into, like you hear the pink mist,
That was your first contact?
That was my first contact in country outside the wire. Our compound before we actually took over, like we would get artillery rounds here and there and things like that. But as far as like being on the ground in the city, like, yeah, that within the first 30 minutes, there's a guy turning into a pink mist, and you got one guy's knocked out unconscious, eardrums are blown out, one dude's burnt a little bit, So immediately you get there and you realize, like, this. All right, we're here.
How old were you
Yeah,
then?
this is the real deal, huh?
How old were you at that point?
21.
21.
Yeah. And again, 21's not an adult, right?
No.
You may be able to go buy some booze and some cigarettes nowadays, but I mean, you're not ready for anything. At 50 years old, you're not ready to see somebody turn into that, right? But that was my first introduction into war. Wasn't, an ambush or anything like that, like previous wars or anything like that, because the wars had changed. But, like we were talking about, but before we got recording, my first half of my deployment, I was a driver for the STRIKKER. So, while I wasn't always actively in a building or anything like that, if there was anything that we had come across or we had to go respond to, I got to see really like the totality of the left behind of the VBID or the IED, coming up from, a driving standpoint, I'm first eyes really, being able to see some things like that. So, while at this point, my experience over in Iraq was not from a on the ground experience, but just from a mental standpoint, seeing, human body turn into mist. And then there's a guy that, one time we were on patrol and some car bombs had gone off, like parked, and we went and responded to it. And there was a guy laying on the street, and he was all mangled up. I mean, tendons, all everything hanging out, right? And in my mind, like, this dude's dead, right? And all of a sudden, like, he comes to and just like, and just starts screaming and going ballistic. And like that sticks in my mind. Like 20 years later, like, it still plays with me, like, because it's weird, right? I mean,
it's crazy how things that have happened so long ago in such a short amount of time can stay with you forever.
Like literally, I'm just, as a driver, I'm driving by him, and I just happen to see him come back to life, and lack of a better term, man, that freaked me the hell out. There ain't no other way to put it, man. So
let me ask you this out of curiosity, because a lot of our viewers are military, fire, EMS, different ones because of our backgrounds and people we know, but then there's also a lot of people who are not.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of us have that first death, that first thing and all that. But I'm curious, what was your mindset? What was your feelings? Fear, anger, upset?
As far as seeing the first,
what was that like?
Nothing.
Yep.
Dude's gone. I don't care. I ain't dead. He's probably a terrorist.
Yeah. And I asked that because I truly believe, and I've talked to other people about this. I mean, you have your warriors, you have your people who are just, they are made to be military, fire, police. It is just in them. And I've had situations where my only negative thought to what I saw was, am I really so effed up? Because that didn't even bother me.
To be honest with you, man, like, I felt the exact same way. Like, when I was there, I was in the moment, right? It was training. It was what I signed up to do.
I'm gonna agree with you on that.
I didn't feel any remorse until years down the road.
And I think it's more of that's not who I am as a core individual. Like I do feel, I mean, like yeah, I felt bad for that guy or whoever, you know. But I think it's more of because we're in the moment and it's our training that it's been instilled in us from day one for you when we hit basic training to the time we hit, dude, whatever, man. I don't care. It's not me.
What makes
it's
the
war.
green grass grow? Blood.
Blood.
Red blood.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it, dude.
You know, the one
and why does God love the infantry? Because the sky is blue. That's it. That's all you need to know, right? And it's just another casualty of war. It ain't your buddy. And that's all that matters. You feel like, you know, again, because like the first one, I don't know, like I said, you know, didn't feel anything because I didn't know, right? He didn't have a gun or anything like that. And if it had been in like in a civilian, like a true civilian that I know for a fact, like a kid or something like that, like, yeah, it would have, it probably would have bothered me pretty good.
You know, you saying that, there is I've heard a lot of stuff on this, and we won't dive big into it because I actually have some stuff planned coming up for this. Is when you're military, and not to take anything away from any military person, but when you're military and you're going over there, you're fighting and you're killing people who do not look like you. They do not believe the same as you. There's no way to relate them to your sister, brother, niece, nephew. And as I've started all this, I've done a lot of research and reading on the impact, actually, though, on the first responder world within the U.S. Your firemen, your nurses, your cops, all that, because it's one thing to look down the sights, I would imagine, I can only imagine, at a Afghani or whatever in a man garb versus you're looking down your rifle at a civilian who's wearing the same brand clothes as you, lives on the other end of town than you, and you may have to take that shot, or you're seeing people dying.
Yeah.
You know,
or you just may have passed them in Kroger the night before.
You know, I had a lady die one time in a wreck, and the vehicle was the identical vehicle that my own mom drove. So, like, pulling up on that, you know, stuff like that. So
that's a stress level right there, brother.
Yep. And so that's where, that's why I have such a big passion for people don't realize the mental health of both the military side, and from what I've seen and a lot of the podcasts and a lot of the research I follow, it's never really the fact that they were killing people. It's like Eddie Penny. He loves shooting people in the face. They're bad.
Mm-hmm.
They want to hurt me, my family, my country. I will kill them all day long. Most of your military, your worst stuff comes from your brothers getting hurt. Mm-hmm. And then I'm finding in the first responder world, you know, seeing the first death I saw, I was 20 years old. And it was a 23-year-old guy who aspirated and died choking on his own vomit, and that was my first time doing CPR, and I'm 20 years old, so I'm associating this. He literally lived 3 miles down the road from me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's personal.
And so it's that's a big thing I really want to open people up to, is one of the reasons I started all this. Is just, it is impactful. It does not matter whether it's military. It doesn't matter whether it's first responder or even civilians who have been in situations where they had to witness some stuff. But for us who have had training, most of us just going about the day.
All that, you know, all the stuff that happened, it's over there, right? It all happened over there. And one of the hardest things coming back is turning that switch off, right? With multi-deployments, that switch gets harder and harder to flip on and off, you know. And I can only imagine, you know, for a first responder, you got to do that every time you leave the house. You know, you got to flip that switch.
It's an on-off switch every day.
Yeah. Well, like one of the times that I had to ask myself, I was like, man, am I screwed up in the head? There was a situation. I have never fired my weapon on an individual. I have been in a situation where a suspect was taken down right in front of me with lethal force, and I was about 18 feet from him when it happened. And that pink mist popped. And literally 2 minutes after it, my only thought was, man, I'm hungry. I wonder if they'll let me get a Snicker bar and a drink. And later,
I feel you.
Later, I got to thinking about it, and I was like,
you become numb to it.
I was like, you know, later that night, I'm sitting in my patrol car. I'm like, I just watched her head get blown off, and all I wanted was a Snicker bar and a Dr. Pepper.
And a foot long from Subway.
That was all that was on my mind. And I've talked to people about stuff like that. And it's part of the training, and it's part of the desensitization.
And I've never really thought about it in that concept before, talking in blending both worlds together. That, you know, like when you go on a mission in deployment, like at least for us, like when we got done with a mission, our first stop was the chow hall. Like we were either going to get breakfast, lunch, or dinner, because usually we got in before or after dinner time. We were all always hungry. And so, you know, we had the opportunity to eat, so we always took the opportunity to eat. So, I mean, you go out from a mission, and again, when I got there, the war was a lot different than 01, 02, 03, 04. We may go a week without hearing a bullet, or we may go an hour. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just hit or miss. Like, it was a different war because they were setting up IEDs, and the ambushes and the gunfights weren't as much. So, I mean, but still you had to deal with a lot of stressors and things like that. You know, human casualties from whether it be, you know, unfortunately, you know, maybe us with a vehicle accidentally hitting a car. And, you know, I mean, because things like that happen over there because it's such a populous area and you're in a 25-ton vehicle. It's kind of hard to stop it if somebody pulls out in front of you. So you're in basically Hell's Kitchen to a degree when you go outside the wire, and the first thing you do is, I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat, dog.
I used to plan my lunches by our missions.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. And it didn't matter what you encountered. Yeah, it didn't matter what you encountered that day. I mean, when you pulled back through the wires, that was done, and you were back to normal. It was like a switch. You had to flip a switch when you left a wire. Yeah. And when you came back home, you could turn it off and go do your thing, go call your family, go do, you know what I mean? Like, it was very, I've never really put those two together, really, honestly.
I really want to highlight exactly what you went through because I think that gives a good comparison to where you are now.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I don't want to sell you short whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. So how are we on time? I know.
Yeah, we're pushing, where we at, boss man? Hour 121.
All right. So
I just wanted to make sure.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So to get to my story, as far as military wise and things of that nature, I got to tell one quick story that doesn't really, affect me physically. Again, like I talked about, the leadership that I had there in the military was, like when you hear the comments, I would have laid on a grenade for them. Like, my platoon leader, retired First Sergeant Peter Lara. Guys like Sergeant Mike Barrera, Wayne Landis, Joel Berger, Eric, dang, dude, I'm forgetting his name to save my life. Eric Johnson. Man, they told me to go get on that grenade and lay on it. I was doing it, man. Like, I entrusted them men. I believed in them. And like, to me, they were men of men, right? Like, they were men. Man, November of 2005, I wasn't with my platoon that night, but they ended up getting ambushed, and they took a lot of casualties, man. It was legit, like we were talking about the original war. Like, they had machine guns built in stairwells. They had tunnels dug to get out. Women and children were fighting them. They were fusing hand grenades together and chunking them out. It was the real deal, man. Guy named Sergeant Wayne Landis, they had one of these grenades go off to the side of his head, and he's got a ceramic skull now, man. Like, the real deal. My buddy that I talked about went and visited in Florida that I can't compare my wounds to. He's missing, like, he can't use his dominant hand, his left hand, and one of those hand grenades went off on his hand. He's got 180 pins and screws in his left hand. My platoon sergeant was shot in the face. His teeth got lodged in his esophagus, and his scapula got shattered 17 different pieces. I think Sergeant Barrera got shot multiple times in his hand. I think there was one of the guys. I think he was shot about a dozen times, and all of them, but like 2 of them hit the plate. Wow. Guy got shot through the kneecap. Dude got shot and the arm spiral fractured all the way down to his wrist. Another kid got shot in the femoral artery, lived. I mean, just the real deal. SF got called in. They came in on the little birds. They went in the house, and they blew the house up on the SF guys. It was like the real deal. So when I say that a lot of my struggle has been validity in my military career, it comes from the men that I served with, knowing who they were beforehand and the type of men that they were before we deployed, the struggles that I saw them go through, and just knowing that there's no way in the world, just my little minor injury compared to theirs, that there's any way that I can compare myself to them. And man, that really, we're fixing to get into that, and that really took a toll on me. So, again, you know, like half my platoon gets Purple Hearts. I mean, I get back from my, back to my platoon, and like that core nucleus that we go back talking about with my parents being disrupted, like that core nucleus who's now my family, my new family, is completely dissolved. Like half of them are gone. There's a whole new platoon. We got a whole new set of leaders. And it just rocked my world. Right. Luckily enough, I say luckily enough, unfortunate enough, but luckily enough for me, after that ambush, I was promoted and became a team leader. And talk about God, the guy that I replaced, the guy that has the screws in his hands. I took his team as a team. I took his position as a team leader. And then on his birthday of January of 2006, we were on patrol. And I got shot by a sniper, and man, it was just a normal day, nothing crazy. We were out with a tactical psychological team, handing out propaganda to the local populace. You know, hey, bad guys threaten you. Here's a number you can call. We'll come help you out. Da 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 da. And man, they just one sniper bullet, and I was going to walk and check on a machine gunner, and the Lord told me to take a step off that curb, and luckily it changed that line of sight up for that sniper. And instead of going in between my rib cage and my arm, going in that soft spot where they knew at that time we weren't wearing any body armor. They knew we had front and back plates, and they were being trained to go in between. And that's obviously where he was trying to go. But, the Lord intervened and told me to take a step, go on, check on him, and I did. I heard my bone crack before I knew anything. Like he was so close. I heard my bone crack, and then I heard the shot. And it, like, the force of the bullet literally spun me like 360 degrees. Almost like a top. Like it spun me.
Wow.
And I took off running to try to get behind the vehicle to get behind cover. Like I knew I was shot, right? And on the way to get behind the vehicle, like I guess I just go into shock or whatever, and I fell over. Slammed my head against the ground, and I was laid, like microphone's in the way, but I was laid with this arm. This is the arm I got shot in, and I was laying in my uniform, and my gear and everything was just soaking up my blood. So there was no blood coming out. I tried to raise my rifle up and try to, steady it with my steady hand, my left arm I got shot in, and my arm wouldn't move. So I knew it was broke, and I didn't know anything else, right? And I'm just laying in the middle of the street. And it's funny to laugh at now, but my platoon leader at the time, and he came over to me and he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I got shot." And he's like, "I don't see any blood." He was like, "Are you sure you got shot?" And I was like, "Sir, I got shot." And then my squad leader comes over and they pick my arm up and blood just starts going everywhere. And my platoon leader was like, "GD, you got shot." I was like, "Dude, I just told you that. Like, what are we doing, bro? Like, get me the hell out of here, man." But here's the cool thing about that, man. So I get shot, and within 30 minutes in a combat zone, I'm having surgery.
Yeah.
Like, how cool is that? Like, I get shot, and within 30 minutes, I'm on an operating room table, man. So, get wheeled in, and I remember you talk about that leadership, that we all kind of crave as, the men that we are, and you look for those men that have that can kind of get you to take your breath when you need to, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected people in the world. And my boy Thomas over here can probably attest to this. In the military, just like probably in law enforcement, there's that chain of command. And until you're a certain rank, like, you don't associate with other command chain. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they got stars or bars and you're an E5, like, you don't talk with them, right? If they got a diamond in between their chevrons and rockers, you don't talk with them, right? Infantry's like amplified. Like, chain of command is everything. And our unit was that. Like, chain of command was everything. But as they were taking me off the striker to get me into the hospital to go to surgery, my first sergeant is standing over me, and I'm looking at me, and he looks down on me, and he said, "Davis, you're still one ugly son of a bitch." And blood's just everywhere. I got tourniquets. I've been hit with 10 cc's of morphine, and he has the balls, just, you know. But man, I mean, I smiled in the face of not knowing what's really going on. And come to find out, man, take 30% of my bicep. The bullet takes out 20% of it with the damage already done. They have to take out another 10%. It nicks that artery, so I mean, they're having problems stopping blood. I mean, it could have been a real serious deal if I'm not there in 30 minutes, right? But man, just to be able to smile in that moment, right? Like, wow, you know, God put him there for that, and I didn't see it at the time. Long and short of it, man, I remember getting on the operating room table, and, you know, really the only time, I mean, like, people talk about, and I guess it's just adrenaline running, that they didn't know they got shot or it didn't hurt. They're full of crap, dude. That thing hurt so bad. Like, I know what you go to the doctor and they're like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst pain you ever felt. I know what the 10 is now, for real. So, like, I tell them all the time, like, I know what that 10 is. So if I'm telling you 7, like, I'm hurting, dude. Like, you know what I mean? So, man, some of the best surgeons in the absolute world, man. I was in so much pain. I do remember looking at them, both of the surgeons, and I said, "Look, guys, I don't care if you have to cut my arm off. I want to go to sleep. I'm hurting." And that was the last thing I said to them before they put me to sleep. And I wake up, man, and I still got my arm and all that stuff. And again, you know, 30% of my biceps gone. I have an internal, so the crack that I described was actually not the bullet hitting my bone. It was the force of the bullet going underneath my bone that fractured my humerus. So they put an internal fixator in there, stitched me back up, miles upon miles of nerve damage. For a good 60 to 90 days after that, I really had zero feeling in my arm or use of it. I mean, when I say use of it, I couldn't move an empty Coke can from one place to the other with that arm. So there, you know, you start dealing with that, right? You know, how's my life going to be different now? You know, just tons of stuff start going through your head, right? I mean, once I found out I'm going to be okay, right? Like, just a lot of stuff. But, you know, I get through that, and they send me to Landstuhl, Germany. I'm getting, you know, exfilled out of the country and going back to my rear duty detachment, you know, to physical therapy and all that stuff, and just kind of wait for the guys to come home. Landstuhl, doing a couple of other surgeries over there just to make sure everything's cleaned up. I think I had like 4. I'll be honest with you, a lot of stuff from that time up until, you know, about 5 or 6 years ago, just really fuzzy. I'll be honest with you. It's like 4 surgeries, I think. But talk about God stepping in and giving you that moment and all that stuff again that, you know, I'm still not seeing at the time. I'm just thinking it's a coincidence and all that stuff. We pull on the tarmac at Landstuhl, and there's a C-17 sitting on the tarmac getting ready to take all these wounded soldiers back across the United States. And on the tail wings, the state of Mississippi flag.
Nice.
172nd Airlift Wing out of Flowood, Mississippi.
Wow.
Didn't know a soul on the plane, but they saw I was from Mississippi, and they treated me like royalty, bro.
Nice.
I mean, I wasn't eating MREs. I was getting to eat their steamed shrimp and bratwurst they had in them steamers. I got to go do cockpit tours going over the Atlantic Ocean. Just what I needed to, right? You know what I mean? So God's still constantly interjecting himself in my life at that point too, and I'm just not seeing it, you know. Fast forward, get out in 2006, August of 2006. You know, the rehab and everything was fine. You know, it didn't have any real problems. Like, you know, eventually got full strength, you know, not full strength, but mobility and use of my arm back. And, you know, I still have days where lifting a gallon of milk over the truck bed hurts sometimes. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, I compare myself to these other guys, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm lucky as heck to be alive, where I am. So I get out, and that's when the real struggle really began, man. And the main struggle I had after the injury and things of that nature was just a lot of questions. What's next? I don't know what's going on. I'm not close with God, so I'm not really reaching out with him. I'm really lost, right? Instantly turned to drinking because that's what I was doing beforehand, and I was cool beforehand. I had an off switch to a degree a little bit.
Yeah.
But then when you come back, that off switch doesn't sometimes come back with you, man. And you turn, and we can talk about this a little bit more in depth or not. But you see guys who before they deploy never have a drink of alcohol a day in their life. Man, next thing you know, you get a call from the MPs, and he's got a gun, and he's drinking a fifth of whiskey, and there's a domestic dispute going on, bro. If you step outside the wire one time, if you're in an altercation one time, any type of stress environment like that, it'll change you. And I say, so, we get out, and immediately, went right back to work. I was fortunate enough, brother-in-law of mine was in the construction field and gave me a job. And, life was honestly pretty easy, man. Like, I didn't see that I had any issues, right? Because either I wasn't wanting to see them or would just, go out and drink and cut up and carry on like I always would and just, let it all pass and start the next week and deal with it. Come Thursday, Friday, I'd drink and, just that rabbit hole, right? And just went through that lifestyle, again, just not really out of control, but not living a Christ-filled life, as a man of God who is, been given a woman of God, because that's what my wife is. She's a woman of God, and she set so many examples for me that when I was going through my struggles that I didn't want to see, and I'd get aggravated at her for saying things and stuff like that. But like I said, there's no doubt, that I know God put her in my life for that reason. But my wife and I actually met shortly after I got out. Same year, I got out in August of 06, and we met right before Thanksgiving of 06. So we've been together for about that long, and again, she, she's always let me. She's the wife that kind of gives you enough rope to hang yourself, but then she's gonna help you hang yourself. You know what I mean? She's gonna help you do it because she's tired of it. Man, she should have hung me a bunch. Because even though 90% of the time I was a good guy and a good husband, there was that 10% of that switch that would come on that I couldn't keep cut off. And it was anger, and that's how it really manifested. A lot of my issues was anger. It was not a perception of culture or society, but an internal emptiness that I had that I was always trying to fill. Like I was trying to fill an empty void that was gone in my life. I made the comment at times that, man, I peaked at 23. Yeah. That's a hard thing to deal with. I peaked physically at 23. I'll never physically be the same shape I was at 23. I'll never be a badass as I was at 23. You know what I mean? Like I'll never be what I was from here on out. And as you see other men, when you come back at 23 or 24, like they're just getting going. And at 23, you're done. You know what I mean? Like you've been through so much of life at that point, like you're done and they're just getting started. And then that stuff starts creeping in. So like I kind of described it when I gave, the real testimony that you guys heard, it starts with just a little chirp, right? And I was numbing the chirps with the alcohol to where, I wasn't considering them chirps Monday through Thursday because they just weren't chirps to me at that point. It was just something between, the weekend that was just devil trying to get after me. You know what I'm saying? And living that country boy Christian life, there's a devil trying to get after me. I'm going to go have some beer now, and hang out and have a good time. And it's such an easy lifestyle to fall into, right? Yeah. To be able to go to work, deal with stressors that you may have had in your past professions or you're dealing with in your current professions, and just going home and just drinking a beer or drinking, at my case, sometimes 14 or 16 or, whatever I can get my hands on, as many as I get my hands on until I pass out.
Well, you said something a while ago I gotta elaborate on, because when you said it, it just hit me to my core. Is, like you said, you were 90% of what you were doing was good. You're a good man in all these ways. And we do this to ourselves, and I'm the world's worst about it. And I did this for years. If you listen back to my testimony, I think it's pretty evident what I was doing. There were all these areas in my life that I was like, man, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. We miss that 10%, and we think, oh, it's just 10%, it's just 5% of my life where I'm struggling over here.
That's not who I really am.
But that's more impactful than anything else, because I was the same way.
Absolutely.
It
was almost like you were justifying when you were that 10%.
Yes.
Yep.
Because there's tons of people
we can all raise our hand there, right?
I believe would tell you that, I'm a nice guy. I was a good guy over all these years, but similar to you, my 10% or so was a lot of that anger. And it could go from 0 to 100 like that with no warning.
Over the littlest thing.
That's the thing. When I think back and what is embarrassing to me.
I'm embarrassed the way I used to act.
And it's hard.
And still act sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not.
And that's real quick. That's not to jump into, but that's what we need our listeners to understand is, we're sitting here talking about how, God's prevalent in our life and all that stuff, and we're men of God and all that stuff. I promise everybody that hears this right now, before I get back to my house, which is an 18-minute ride, I'm going to screw up about 2 or 3 different times.
Absolutely.
From anything that I think mentally or something that's going to come out of my mouth, I'm going to mess up.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the listeners need to know that we get in such a society opinionated mindset of how Christians act, and that, well, Walt was on this podcast Sunday afternoon talking about how he's doing this, but man, I had a phone conversation with him the other day, and man, he was F-bombing this, that, and I'm not saying that that's the right thing for me to be doing, but let's face it, I'm a sinner and I'm going to fail.
Yeah.
And that's what the difference is in being a Christian and believing in God, and being a Christian and trying to walk in his image, and understanding that without him, you're going to fail. You're going to fail 100% of the time without him. There ain't no 99.9% of the time. 100% of the time, if you are not seeking him and seeking like-minded individuals, you're going to fail.
Correct. And so, like I was saying, for me, what is very embarrassing to me, pisses me off about myself, is I've sat down, especially with the divorce I went through and all that, and you start examining a lot of stuff about why and how, and he did stuff in that area and in all areas. I look back and I'm like, think about the times when I got really angry, how I would lose my temper or this or that, and I'm like, I've yet to remember a time where I lost my temper where it was even a little bit justified. It was always over the most stupid thing that was so irrelevant. And then now, as I've learned through therapy how to look at myself and understand and talk with them about it, most of the time what it was, that event, that thing that was said to me or done or whatever, had nothing to do with the anger. It was from a absolute place of just empty, disappointed with myself. It was something deeper going on. But the problem is, and what I want more people to realize, is it don't matter if 90% of the time you're this great person. That 10%, when you start having those moments, overshadows everything.
That's right.
It's like you hear people you hear people talk about, I feel like I do, out of 10 things, I can do 9 right. But if I do one thing wrong, that's all everybody remembers. I used to say that all the time.
I can remember my wife telling me at one point, and I'm not saying verbatim, but to the degree of like, basically, I don't know who you are anymore. And in my mind, speaking to what you are, like, 90% of the time I'm doing what's right, but the 10% was so bad of how I was acting and handling things that it didn't matter. She was to the point that other 90%, she didn't give a crap about that anymore.
Yep.
And man, like looking back on it, you know, and those comments came out of her mouth, you know, 24, 36 months ago, you know, when in my mind at that point, our marriage is still amazing, you know, and it was, but dude, I didn't know who I was. I had lost my identity. Yeah. And
I was about to say, when you said that, I can remember multiple times my wife telling me that, my ex-wife now telling me that I don't even know who you are. I'm tired of how you're acting, this or that, or, you know, it don't matter all the good you've done for 2 weeks. Look at what you just did. And it would make me so mad.
Yeah.
And
because I'm trying. You don't see me trying.
And now looking back,
yeah,
if she were sitting right here, right now, my response to that statement of she didn't know who I was, she didn't understand how I was acting, I didn't know who the F I was.
I'm with you, dude. And honestly, that revelation just came to me while we were sitting there talking about
and honestly,
I didn't know who I was at that point.
If I would have recognized that and said that back then, things to one degree or another, who knows, could have been different, might have. But I never said that. I never, you know, I would always take it as, I'm hurt. I was already angry. Now you're telling me I'm angry. So I'm just going to get more angry.
Yeah, you want to see angry? I'm finna show you angry. I'm finna burn, and my wife will laugh when I say this.
Watch this.
My saying it, I'll burn this house down. I'll drive to that building. I'll drive to that business. I'll burn that business down to the ground. Like, yeah, dude, you want to see anger? You ain't seen nothing.
You know,
yet,
and
dude.
I think you know, people with our background, we have this. It all stems back to training, right? Like, we have this attention to detail that you're talking about, flipping out over the smallest things that matter, you know, in a combat situation or in your line of work, as a first responder. That, yeah, if that shoelace isn't laced up properly on that boot, you know that guy's an intruder, right? Mm. So that small detail of, did you lace your boots right?
Yep.
That attention to detail, I feel like we take that home with us and we project that on ourselves. And when we find all that's lacking, because like we were saying before, like we don't get training on how to come home and be a husband.
No,
you know?
No, you don't.
We know how to walk, talk, eat, dress, how to, you know.
And that's where a lot of, like, so to kind of, you know, I didn't mean to cut you off, Thomas.
No, go for it.
Okay. So like with my story, my testimony, that's kind of, you know, when I was numbing everything, drinking, like really other than me drinking was the only problem we had. Like I didn't have a lot of angry outbursts. Anger was an issue just because I'm a guy, right? Like we get angry or whatever, but anger really wasn't an issue until I put drinking down. And then I didn't have a way to cope with anything. And you have all these emotions and angers and things of that nature, and you have no way to cope with it. The only way you were coping with it, you've eliminated it from your life, because your wife basically tells you at some point, like, A or B, dog, A or B. You know what I mean? And I'm going to choose A all day long. I'm going to choose my wife every day, all day long. But that's honestly when the mental struggle and everything from Iraq started to rear its head, to the point where my PTSD it's mainly anger. That's how it facilitates itself. Man, I got holes in my sheetrock at the house, you know, and I leave them there until we move, just to remind me of where I was. And I don't want to be that guy anymore. And my wife and my daughter are cool with it. I mean, they understand, and then I'm blessed to see, you know, like I said, I got a wife and daughter that have seen my transformation and know how much of a happier individual and a man that I am now than I was before, you know, I refound my identity and what that identity looks like, man. And so going on with talking about the alcohol, like seriously, I was never abusive to my family, never verbally or physically abusive to my family. I was always wanting to kind of be the life of the party, in a good mood, but I was aggravating as hell is what I've come to find out, you know. I was that guy that I didn't like to be around sober. You know what I mean? Like I was him. Like I was what I didn't like to be around
Yeah.
when I was drinking. And it took me to be sober for a couple of years to hear stories and things. And I'm like, holy crap. It was to the point, we'd go to Ole Miss games and I'd get so hammered I'd have to come back on Sunday morning and watch the replay to figure out what the heck actually happened in the game, bro. To the point where it's a habit now. Even though I don't drink, if I go to an Ole Miss game and watch it in person, I come home the next day and watch the replay. Like it's just a habit I created. But anyway, when I quit drinking, I didn't have any way to cope. So my faith and my salvation, even though I was going to church on Sunday morning and every now and again on Wednesday night or Sunday night, telling the preacher man that I'm doing this, and I'm tithing and I'm, doing all this stuff, man, that mask was on and it was, I didn't know at the time, but the mask was getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And, I didn't want to lean on the church. Be truthfully honest with you, even though I was, a believer in the man of God, because I was going back and creating easy excuses for me to not seek him, i.e., I don't want to get involved in church because I saw what the church did to my dad when one of his children made a mistake. They punished him for something his child did. And we all know, and you deal with it on a regular basis being in the community, man, you probably deal with youngsters that come from a good home, God-fearing mom and dads, raised the right way, but they're kids. And your mom and daddies can't control your kids when they're outside the house. You have to do what you know is best when they're in their house and hope that they do that same thing when they're out, right?
Hey, luckily in Rankin County, there are a whole lot of people that believes that, because I was that guy.
Yeah.
I had the mom and daddy that was like that I could have ruined my family's name many times.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, that's hard.
It is. So again, I'd lost my identity and I was just swimming. I was trying to fill empty voids with just worldly possessions, man. Like I said, growing up, not coming from a whole heck of a lot. I had, and my daughter was born in 2010, and I think she was about 2.5 or 3, and I took a job at a local equipment dealership here, and man, it was a real first taste I got of like the sales world, and these, hearing about commission checks and seeing fancy trucks and nice clothes and stuff, but I always wanted to have, and that's what took the place of Iraq and the adrenaline. It was going and buying a new truck. That was my adrenaline rush, or going and doing, buying something, buying a new gun or buying a camper or going to this new hunting club and spending all my money, just trying to fill the void, right, of fulfillment that the deer camp led to more drinking, further away from God, So, when my wife helped me make the decision to put the alcohol down, deer camp wasn't as important to me anymore. And no offense to anybody that may hear this that's part of the deer camp, but what I needed in my life at that point in time was just not that. I love those guys to death, but I needed some guys who were going to help me find my identity. You know what I mean? And the identity that I once had before I left to go to Iraq, because I lost my identity in Iraq and through everything that happened there and after that. And, just the validity of, I don't want to associate myself with some of the guys that I served with, because my wounds externally aren't as big as their wounds, right? Like, how can I compare and say I'm struggling with just shutting my body down or my mind down, how can I tell somebody that, man, it's been so bad that I've slept in a closet before in the middle of the day just so I can shut the world out? Like, those are real things that we go through as service members or as law enforcement, is that we compartmentalize everything, and we don't want to reach out and talk to somebody that the last resort is a dark closet or it's a gun in our mouth. That's the only way that you're going to be able to shut the world out and get your mind to quit racing, right?
Yeah. Like I got to point out what you're talking about, and I feel like you might be leading to this. You're trying to fill a void, is what you said, and that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like when you're in those moments, like you have a responsibility to fill that void with something. Like no matter what it is, it's almost like, you got a bill to pay or whatever. I need to do this. I need to drink. I need to. But that void you're talking about, how'd you feel it?
How'd I feel it?
Yeah.
The void was filled by the salvation, by the bloodshed of Jesus Christ. I mean, that's 100%, and it goes back to the foundation. I just had to get back to the foundation that my father had put in front of me, right? Yeah. That the Lord had instilled in him to be a preacher, like we go back to the retreat I was invited to, from a friend of mine who at the time was just really an acquaintance. The dude kept my dogs and went on vacation. That was it. Like, I mean, we talked text and everything like that, but we weren't boys or anything like that. And I picked my dogs up, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go on this retreat?" And I didn't go on the first couple he invited me to because of how he, in my mind, my marriage is still good. My wife loves me. We're working through things. We're not hollering and screaming at each other. Professionally, I'm doing well. So my marriage doesn't really need a lot of help. I'm not struggling financially. I mean, I'm not struggling financially. I'm not struggling professionally. And then he sells it with, the closest group of men since the military. Well, that's a bald-faced lie. Like, that's not going to be it, right? And hear this, like, if any of us, if you reach out to any of us, we're going to invite you to the retreat. I think that's all of our main goal is to get as many guys to this retreat and see souls saved and lives transformed, and give men the opportunity and the avenue to know that there's a group of men out there like them that are willing to be transparent and open up and not give a crap what the world has to say or think about them. Because at the end of the day, we're just using the trials and tribulations that the Lord has bestowed upon us to help his kingdom.
Come on.
So fast forward, we get to the retreat, and again, I go into the retreat knowing that I have to work on stuff. And in the retreat, you'll see guys that you can see on their face when they get there. They know that they're supposed to be there. There's some that get off the bus that they don't want to be there. It's evidence written all over their face. They're scared as a son of a gun. But I knew God had me there to work on my anger. Like, I knew that specifically, and that was my main focus, right? And then through the weekend, God revealed some things, and me and he had a lot of great conversations, and we put that anger to bed. And I don't say that to where I don't ever get angry anymore, and I don't lose my composure, and I'm not out of the will of God, because hear me, I am. Yeah. When I say the anger is taken care of, the anger is taken care of to where it's not my anger anymore. I can give it to God, and I know when I give it to God, it is truly gone. If the words come out of my mouth and I say, "God, take this away from me right now," the Lord is going to take it away from me. It may not be in that very same second that I asked for it. It may be 2 days later. It may be a month later. He's going to take it from me, though. And until I had until I had found my identity again at that crusade and rediscovered my salvation and what Jesus Christ had done for me and what he expects from me and what I owe to him. It's what I owe to him because of what he gave for me, right? That I'm able to, with this group of men now, fill that void to where, man, and here's the thing, seriously, if I did not have this retreat, I would not reach out to men. I would not. I would still be in the mindset of when COVID happened. I think, a lot of manly men who take pride in their family and things of that nature. I got my family and I got God, and that's all I need during COVID, right? Like with that, I found comfort. But after COVID and the world kind of opened back up, the devil sunk his heels in on me, and I didn't want to be a part of society. I didn't want to go out and be a light.
I got two things I want to hit on. I'm gonna butcher one of them probably, but you talking about giving that anger up and being comfortable with yourself again. That was one of my biggest hurdles, and what I have held on to a lot recently is I have always blamed myself for everything.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
If I mess up, I'll be the first one to tell you, and I'll take it on the chin. And it wasn't until I started realizing that sin is in me, and I cannot get sin to go away.
Nope.
I can only lean on Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've gotten to where I love the verse. I can never remember where verses are in the Bible, but
I'm with you on that too. Yeah.
My ADD is
I'm with
way
you.
too bad. But, you know.
I have to be honest with you, I always, sounds really bad, but I'd always look at dudes like in church that would tote highlighters with them and stuff. Like, look at these weirdos.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I got a highlighter. Dude, I've started toting a highlighter, and it has helped me get to Scripture so much easier. And I feel like such a turd for feeling. Yeah, no, and look, so that's what I do. Like, I do it in both places now. Like, I'll go to, like, in the Bible app, I'll highlight it in the Bible app, and then I'll highlight it in my physical Bible because, you know, in today's world, you're more apt to have your phone with you readily available than you are your Bible. And I think everybody gets what I mean by that. So, yeah, I want to highlight, if my preacher's preaching on something Sunday morning and I have my physical Bible, I'm going to marry that same highlight to my Bible app. Yeah. And it's made a world of difference.
But when you were talking about that anger and letting it go, but knowing that it's still there.
Yeah, it's never going to go away.
So what I hold on to a lot lately is the verse that talks about the things that I do are not what I want to do. It is the things I want to do that I cannot do.
That's right.
Wow, it's Romans 7.
It is the sin that is in me, therefore it's not me.
That's right.
Because I'll tell you, one of the most hurtful things that a certain person can say to me, it's my ex-wife, it's her favorite thing to say to me, is your sorries mean nothing anymore. And I've heard that for years.
And that's a tough pill to swallow, bro.
If essentially the thing was like things that we all have our habitual downfalls, and if I did something more than once and had to apologize for it, well, it was null and void because
that's right.
You apologized for that last month and now you did it again. It means nothing. Yeah. And it just beat me down, and
it started beating me too.
It made me even worse. Feel like, man, I am this sorry person. I can't do this. So months ago when I've heard that verse, I grew up in church, but it never really resonated with me until it's my way of now being able to forgive myself. Yeah. Is to understand, I want to be this guy over here. Yeah, absolutely. But because of sin, I can't. The other thing I wanted to mention, because in this podcast, we talk a lot about the Charis retreat. So I just wanted to hit on this real quick.
Yeah, and if I could, before we jump into that, on the anger part, during the retreat, where the anger, I want to speak to where the anger finally left me.
Absolutely.
You know, being raised in the church and being around, you know, godly men and things of that nature, all my grandparents were believers and attended church and active in the church. You know, church would always pray over, you know, the preacher's family and you know, if the preacher's children were going over certain, you know, something they'd always, you know, and look, man, I've had numerous people from when I joined the military, before I joined, after I got injured, you know, people pray over me and pray for, you know, just peace and comfort and, you know, no anxiety and things of this nature. And those prayers are amazing. Don't hear me wrong. But at this retreat, man, like I said, I get there and you don't, like, and I know one guy, the guy that invited me, and that's it. Like, there's 78 other guys there and I don't know any of them. And, you know, there's a part during that weekend, a gentleman just came up and asked if he could pray for me. Is there anything? I said, I just want to be able to breathe again. I'm filled with so much anger, and there's a void in my life that I haven't been able to breathe for 15 years or whatever the time was, because growing up I played baseball and football, so I was an athlete. Get out of the military. You know, I'm in the military. I'm an infantryman. I have a job. I have a mission. I have a, you know, responsibility. I know what my directional path is, right? Then you get out, and I don't have an identity anymore because each of my identities are now gone. Can't play baseball and football anymore. Not because of the pulling muscles or anything, but I wasn't never going to get there. But, you know, outside of being a high school student and a preacher's kid, what was my identity. And there was a man named John Ray from West Monroe. Never met this man a day in my life. And when I say he prayed very similar a prayer that 100 people have prayed over me, and the prayer was, Lord, he has been a warrior for his country, now let him be a warrior for his kingdom. And I heard him and I listened to him, but it still took, we talked about that process. I think when we first got in here, it's always a process. Your salvation is always a work in progress, right? Because Jesus doesn't care about what you did yesterday. He's worried about what you're going to do tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, right? So it's a process. But I kept that prayer in my mind over the next several years, man. And then I can remember as a child getting these little things from my parents, and it would be like your biblical name in Hebrew or whatever. You remember those? Mm-hmm. And my name in Hebrew means warrior. I mean,
come on.
So how does John Ray know to pray that I'm a warrior for the country and a warrior for Christ?
That's awesome.
So you can't tell me. So that's what I'm saying. Like this retreat, what my testimony. And that we can whatever with the testimony portion of this, but I think the main driver here is that the three of us collectively have seen the power of the retreat and the men's group that we're a part of and the ministry that they're trying to provide to this area. It's life-changing.
Absolutely.
It's life-changing from the aspect of going as a guest, and really, if you're willing to open your heart up and lay it all on the line and give it to God that weekend, dude, your life's changed. Like, I could check the box for you already. Like, I know it's going to happen. Y'all both know it'll happen, right? If you go into that thing wanting to be worked on.
We're sitting here in front of microphones right now.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we've all seen it, right?
That's right.
But then when you get on the other side that y'all will get to see in August on the teaming side, that's where it really will start to come full circle, where you're actually able to go and help other men. Because, again, 5 minutes before you guys heard my testimony at the retreat, I changed it 20 times. I was fighting like the worst migraine. I was throwing up all week. Had a migraine when I was given it. Like the devil put every roadblock for me to not do that, right? And again, I'm still the type of guy that I still feel that my story is not the best, and that, it's not as good as the next guy's or whatever. But man, the therapy from telling your story, the closeness to God, when you tell your story and you give him all the glory and adoration for where you are in your life, not where you were, man, it changes. And again, like, there's different stages of this retreat too, like from a Christian standpoint or a believer standpoint of your retreat, your team experience. And then if you stay involved with this in this retreat, you're going to have the opportunity to be a leader within this ministry. And God's going to give you an opportunity, because I didn't know this at some point. The thought in my mind was like, maybe I need to give my testimony at this retreat. And then, I ain't going to do that or whatever. And then we're having the team meeting leading up to it. He was like, hey, we need 2 more guys to give their testimony. And Marty Puckett just slaps me in the back of the head, and I just do that. And and here we are, and again, that's the main goal of the retreat. Of this retreat is one, to level the playing field with men. Because again, I think we all know within this retreat, we have a lot of successful businessmen. We have a lot of, movers and shakers within the metro area, a lot of, or just a lot of random guys, just normal guys. Yeah. And it's just,
I was going to say that, and then we're going to
absolutely, man. I get long-winded. I'm sorry.
One of the things earlier that I was wanting to bring up was, you'll hear us talk about this Charis retreat in here. So far, the guys that have come in here on the podcast have been, different military backgrounds, or we did have Matt Cockrell. Yep. But the important thing that I wanted everybody to understand about this retreat, that any of us would love for you to come on or go on another retreat of some kind.
Yeah, that'd be ours. Yeah,
Yeah,
as long as it's biblical and
Save One is not a Charis thing, but we have gotten to experience it. But the unique thing about it is, at ours, there were firefighters, law enforcement, military, doctors in the area, attorneys.
I mean, all walks of life, bro.
Construction workers, realtors, any walk of life you could think of, everything from 18 years old to 70 years old. And the amazing part was, in that room with all this diversity, both age, demographic, everything,
Mm-hmm.
everyone was able to connect to one another to a degree. And you know, you talk about giving testimonies. I was nervous about giving mine because for me, yeah, a lot of people know me as the firefighter, the law enforcement officer. I'm like the worst cop compared to everybody I know.
I was the worst infantryman compared to everybody else I know, so I feel you with that.
I think I was probably the worst fireman compared to all the guys I came up with that I look up to.
Yeah, they're still fighting fires, yeah.
So I kind of even get hesitant, like, speaking about some of that stuff.
Absolutely.
But your testimony, what I have learned is everybody's testimony speaks to somebody. I've had people call me and talk to me about Thomas's testimony.
Well, that's crazy.
That I would have never thought they would have had any any connection to Thomas, because they are on the two different ends of the spectrum, but like that's been their favorite testimony so far. And I've had people same with me, different ones. And so I just want to encourage anyone that if you're involved in anything, if you feel God putting it on your heart to want to come on here with us and talk about your story, don't hesitate to do it, because one, it is extremely therapeutic, as you said, but also you never know what your story may do for somebody else.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of want to end with that and leave that as just be willing to share, be willing to be open, and you have no idea what impact you may have on the people around you.
Absolutely.
Walt, I just want to thank you for your service,
Hey,
man.
thanks, Thomas.
I
Thank
know
you.
We get a funny feeling when people say that.
Yeah,
but I mean it.
I appreciate it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know when people mean it, when they don't
That's
mean
right,
it. That's
man.
right.
We're probably going to have to bring you back in. We're going to have some more.
Dude, and that's the thing,
Great.
like, you know, I think, like, there's just a lot to talk about that, like, that men need to be talking about, right? And that's kind of one of, you know, before we cut off recording, if you want to keep this in there or not, is that, you know, anybody that's listening to this, you know, whether you're in the Jackson metro area or, you know, wherever you're listening, you know, if there's a tug in your mind or in your heart that you're not being the best dad or best husband you can be, dude, there's a group of men that we can get you connected with that is, again, not going to make you the best husband you could possibly be, but they're going to give you the tools and they're going to keep you on the straight and narrow, and we're going to walk through life together. And that's what it's really about, man, is finding a group of guys that want the same thing for, you know, your families, you know. And I think that's one thing that you can take away from the retreat is that, you know, when you leave there and you connect with some of those guys, like it's an instant, like I know I can go to these guys and I'm going to be okay.
Exactly.
And that's my leaving comment is that, you know, with these guys and the group of men that we're associated with, whether it be from Saved One or the Cares Retreat or Better Man that they, you know, Bible study that's going around the metro right now, is that, man, we're going to fail and we're going to continue to fail, but you're going to be around a group of men that know they're going to fail. And that's what's important, is that you don't want to surround yourself with men who don't know, that don't think they're going to fail from a worldly standpoint. Because if they are, they're not seeking the same Lord that we are.
Amen.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank y'all.
Yeah, thank y'all so much, man. I've really enjoyed this. Like, if you guys knew, like, a conversation I had with my preacher, like, 3 years ago, I was like, I think I want to start a podcast about this very same thing, dude. And to see you guys do it, like, you guys are an inspiration to me, for real. I really appreciate what y'all are doing.
Well, you're always welcome here. And I got some stuff coming up topic-wise that we're going to start covering that I'd love to have you back for.
Absolutely, absolutely,
right.
man.
Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Later.
Later.